Julia, and welcome to Race to Win, the weekly sailing podcast where we discuss race strategies, tactics, and more. Today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the intricacies of rounding the mark and what you should do if you do happen to accidentally hit it. And we're going to be using some exciting new technology to illustrate our points, which is the raceQs GeoVids. And that's what you see here. On the left-hand side, you have a video that was shot with a GoPro or another action camera. And then on the right, you have the raceQs 3D replay. The exciting part is that the replay and the video feed are time and geographically synced together. As we watch the actions of the sailors on the boat, we can see how that directly influenced the performance and even watch it in the 3D replay. It's pretty neat technology. So we're going to use the GeoVid here to talk about how to avoid hitting the mark. It starts with watching the boats in front of you. If they're not making the ley line, obviously you want to sail a little bit farther than they did before you tack. The mistake most people make is they try to make that decision from too far away. You want to be just about 6 or 7 boat lengths from the mark when you make your tack. That way you should be close enough to the mark to see what effect the shifting conditions, currents, and wind are having on the boats that are trying to lay the mark. And you should be able to sail far enough that when you do make your tack, you won't have problems. Let's watch what this guy does. So here we see him sailing along. It's pretty rough conditions, and I'm not sure if he meant to lay the mark on this tack. He probably did, but there is quite a bit of current and wind sweeping him down and away from the mark. So he says, okay, I'm not making this. I'm going to throw in another little tack here to make sure that I can lay the mark. And he thought he went far enough, but as we can see, as he's getting closer to the mark, boom. Hits the mark. Now, I went back and looked at this frame by frame to try to figure out why he had hit the mark, because it looked like he was making it. And then I noticed that the jib is completely let go right before they hit the mark. And that's why they hit the mark. And that's a really good example of using a GeoVid to evaluate a performance. The rule used to be you hit the mark, you have to do a 360-degree turn. That is not the rule anymore. Now it says if you hit the mark, execute one turn that must include one tack and one jibe. So in some situations, like if you're on a reach to another reach, you may not actually end up going all the way 360 degrees. That's okay. In this video, they hit the mark, but they still went around it. So that means that they can do their penalty turn somewhere else if they would like to. However, if you hit the mark and then slid off and went below it, you're going to need to make a turn around the mark anyways, so that can count as your penalty turn as well. It's important to note, you hit the mark. You can't just keep sailing all the way to the next mark and then say, oh, this is a good time, there's nobody around, quick, let's flip a 360. The rule says as soon as you are safely able to execute the turn, you need to do so. So let's say you've hit the mark and you've fouled a boat. So you've broken 2 rules. Okay, so you broke a right-of-way rule, you got to do 2 turns. You also hit the mark, so you have to do 1 turn. 3 turns? No. The rule says when you've broken a rule of part 2 and 31 at the same time, you don't have to take a penalty for breaking rule 31. And basically what that means is you only have to do 2 turns because you don't have to do the turn for the hitting the mark, because 3 turns would just make you dizzy and it's unreasonable. So just to sum up, avoid hitting the mark by watching the ley lines of the other boats and by not making your tack until you're about 6 or 7 boat lengths from the mark. If you do mess up and you still hit the mark, as long as you go around it, you can take your penalty turn as soon as it is safe. Remember, you have no rights while you're doing your penalty turn. However, if you miss the mark, you're going to have to reround it, which can count as your penalty turn. And lastly, if you hit the mark and foul somebody within the 3 boat length zone, you are only required to do 2 penalty turns. Happy sailing and see you next time. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can find more on our website, www.raceQs.com/podcast. Or search for raceQs on iTunes and click subscribe. We would love to hear from you, so please give us a review on iTunes.